Good morning. What an exciting thing it is to see a Sunday school filled with people. That's not true in every church that I go to. Now, you heard from the little description there, I am a marine biologist. I'm actually a geneticist by trade. I am not a paleontologist. I'm just a nerd who likes dinosaurs. I also don't pretend I have all the answers. There's some things that I don't have the answer for, but I do have a pretty good answer for just about every question. And a couple of things we're going to raise this morning absolutely 100% support the Bible and biblical history. That is the age of the bones. We'll get to that at the end, though. I've got about 3 hours worth of material. Literally, I have half of my talk blanked out, and I blanked out some more this morning. That's just the nature of it. We're going to hit some easy questions. We're going to do some simple Bible questions. We're going to do some complex questions. I'm going to try to talk to all different people because some of you, specifically probably any 10-year-old in here, knows more about dinosaurs than everyone else put together. And so I have to talk to that audience, and that's a hard audience. A lot of what I'm presenting has already appeared on the pages of our Creation magazine, in our Journal of Creation, on our website, creation.com. You can find it in the books that are out in the foyer. We have some videos out in the foyer. We have a lot of information on dinosaurs. Because this is a huge question for Christians, it raises a massive number of questions, and dinosaurs have been used by the evolutionary community for a long time to argue for millions of years and to argue for evolution. And so, most kids in this country, because of the culture we live in, they just assume evolution is true. They might hear about creation in Bible study or in Sunday school, but most of them kind of partition out away into those little stories that mom and dad believe. So therefore, we have to address evolutionary. We have to address one of the greatest evidences the evolutionist thinks for evolution, which is dinosaurs. So Christian, let me ask you a question. How do you take these creatures that we know existed, by the way? I've met several people over the course of the years who either didn't think dinosaurs were real, or maybe God put the bones in the rocks to test our faith. No. Absolutely, they were real. When we find bones of an animal in the fossil record, you can assemble it into the way the animal looked. Just like if you go out in the field and you find bones of a squirrel or a cow or whatever, you know what the animal used to look like. You put the bones back in order. Oh, that's what the skeleton looks like. So it's not a question of did they exist. It's a question of how do we fit them into biblical history? Because biblical history does not give us millions of years. In fact, if you read that first page of the Bible, it claims in no uncertain terms that God created the universe in 6 consecutive days. We're going to talk more about that in the next hour. But that is a very dramatic and very plainly worded statement about creation. And the date of creation is not millions of years ago. Now, there's questions about how you string the genealogies together, and are there missing generations, which I don't believe, and all that kind of stuff. And, the scholars can argue about exactly how old the earth is, but when you're using the Bible, you cannot get millions of years. I don't know why this thing is, I'm going to not use this. It's popping ahead on me. Okay. Because I talk with my hands too much, probably. But before we go there, we have to ask the question, what's a dinosaur? How is a dinosaur different than a turtle or an iguana or an alligator? Well, the answer is that whether they had 2 legs or 4, they stood up. All the reptiles alive today, except for snakes, their legs stick out to the side. So when an alligator wants to run, it has to do a push-up and has to run, and when it's done running, what does he do? He rests on his belly. Because it takes energy, that splaying leg posture, to lift the body up. But dinosaurs had legs not too much different than yours. Now, the hips are made of different bones, and they have a different shape, but functionally, it's very similar. Do you learn something? Okay. The flying reptiles, the pterosaurs, are not dinosaurs. The giant aquatic reptiles, the mosasaurs, the plesiosaurs, the pliosaurs, those are not dinosaurs. They're other groups of extinct reptiles that we tend to all lump together. But a dinosaur has a pretty specific definition. They also have different holes in their skull. So you see the skull, oh, that's got that hole, that means it's a dinosaur. But then the question comes up, what happened to them? I have an article on creation.com. Dinosaurs are almost certainly extinct. And my boss made me put the word almost in there. We've had decades of creationists like me reporting on people saying that they saw a living dinosaur. There's a famous one in the Congo Basin in Africa called Mokele Mbembe, people in the South Pacific Islands. And I said, okay, those reports come to us. They're second and third hand testimony. I can't use that. That's not science. Plus, all these decades later, not a single one of those reports has been confirmed. I don't think they're there. But what if we did find a living dinosaur? What would the evolutionists say? Would they say, oh, evolution is wrong? No. In the 1930s, when they found the coelacanth in deep water off of Madagascar, that's a stumpy-legged fish that almost everyone was saying, this is the transitional form from water to land. That's what they were calling the coelacanth, thinking it was a shallow water animal. And they found it alive, supposedly 65 million years after it went extinct. And what'd they say? What do you know? One of those things managed to live all this time. So living dinosaurs is not a magic bullet, and honestly, we don't have any good information. Solid information, they're still alive. Okay, but what does the evolutionary community tell us? What killed off the dinosaurs? Yeah, big meteor. Does anyone know how long ago that happened in evolutionary history? 65 million years ago. That's a number just to know. No, I don't believe the number, but I know the number. Right? I know evolutionary theory. I know evolutionary theory very well. I've studied it more than most biologists study it. Because of my position as creationist, I had to study it. I had to know it. So 65 million years ago is the end of the Cretaceous period. All right. Have you seen some of the Jurassic Park movies? You ever realize that most of those dinosaurs are Cretaceous dinosaurs? But Cretaceous Park doesn't have the same ring to it, does it? No, never ask me to watch science fiction with you, by the way. Like the opening scene in Stargate. We've carbon dated this unknown metal. It's not on the periodic table of elements. Metals aren't carbon. So that movie from then on was a disaster. Anyway, just saying. So we have this big meteor that supposedly hit the Yucatan Peninsula 65 million years ago at the end of the Cretaceous era and killed off the dinosaurs. Okay. But how come the turtles that are abundant in dinosaur era rocks are still alive? How come the crocodiles, which supposedly predate the dinosaurs, are still alive? How did the butterflies survive? We have fossils of every major branch of the butterfly family tree buried with dinosaurs. Beats me. I honestly, see, from my perspective, I have a hard time imagining that Noah's flood killed off the plant-eating, the meat-eating, the large, the small, the northern, the southern, the equatorial dinosaurs. There's lots of species, lots of diversity, and they all got killed off. But the evolutionist has the same problem. Had butterflies survive when all the dinosaurs died out? Nobody knows the answer to that question because we don't have time machines. Okay? I'm going to try to weigh things also. As a scientist, I like to take information and say, okay, this is, how powerful is that information? Is it also information the other side can use? Then it's not an argument for either side. And you have to weigh your information. When you're looking at a fossil record, though, you see a lot of different dinosaurs. You see a lot of species of dinosaurs. Here's 11 ceratopsid dinosaurs. Now, all of you have heard of Triceratops. He's on the top left there. Triceratops and the other, has anyone ever heard of Styracosaurus or Pachyrhinosaurus? Yeah, one nerd, all right. Microceratops is not there. Protoceratops is not there. That's some of the ceratopsids. But they all have similarities. They have a beak, they have a frill, they have some horns. I mean, if you found a toe bone of a ceratopsid dinosaur in the fossil record, you would be able to say, oh, that's a ceratopsid. It's different than the other types of dinosaurs. You wouldn't know what species it is, but how many species are there? That raises an interesting question. As a biologist, I say that if two things can interbreed, they're the same species. They're all dead. We don't have them in a zoo. We can't do crossing experiments with these guys. So the geologists use a different definition of the word species. They say if two things look different, they're different species. Anyone recognize that building? That's the world's largest dog standing next to the world's smallest dog. I don't put money on it, but I would wager, if I was a betting man, that an evolutionist, if they didn't know what dogs were, if they found bones of these animals in the fossil record, they would not put them into the same species. They would not put them into the same genera. Oh, they're carnivores, because they have the carnivore teeth. Okay. But Charles Darwin taught us that species change very slowly over millions of years. It would take a very long time to generate very large differences. But genetically, those are gray wolves. Not red wolves, gray wolves. And we know that gray wolves and red wolves can interbreed, and we know that they can interbreed with coyotes, and we can know that dogs can interbreed with African jackals. That's one giant species. They're actually freely interfertile. They don't tend to, well, because we keep dogs in cages. We don't let them walk around with wolves. In fact, in Canada, there's a massive problem in one area of Canada because native wolves have interbred with dogs and have interbred with coyotes. And there's this very large wolf-like coyote that's not afraid of people and likes invading subdivisions. And the cats are disappearing. Because all the dogs are, biblically, one created kind. I have a series of articles on creation.com. Species were designed to change. And I go through many, many, many different mechanisms that God engineered into his creation, giving them the ability to adapt and change over time. That's not evolution. That's engineering. Oh. So I just stole everything Charles Darwin talked about, said, thank you, Mr. Darwin. That's ours. Go away. But when you look in the fossil record, there's about 50 different types or kinds of dinosaurs. Get the ceratopsids and the duck-billed hadrosaurs and the tank-like ankylosaurs. You have the stegosaurs, the long sauropods, and our challenge, the theropods, the meat eaters. Look at T-Rex with the 6-inch long teeth. How would he have originally been described? Who says he's an herbivore that eats plants? Who says he's a carnivore that eats meat? Who says he's a scavenger, he only eats dead things that he can find? Who says he's an omnivore, eats whatever he wants? How come, did I see anyone that raised their hand for A? Yeah, maybe some people are like, maybe? That's a trick question, though. How would he have originally been described? By whom? The evolutionary paleontologist that discovered this guy in Montana in the 1800s? Or Scripture? Look what God told Adam in Genesis chapter 1. See, I have given you every herb that yields seed, which is on the face of all the earth, and every tree whose fruit yields seed. To you it shall be for food. Also to every beast of the earth, to every bird of the air, to everything that creeps on the earth in which there is life, I have given every green herb for food, and it was so. All right, Christian. Did God create all animals to eat plants? Yes or no? Why then do we know that some dinosaurs ate meat? We find crunched up bones in their stomach. We find baby dinosaurs, mammals, birds. All those things have been found in dinosaur stomachs. What happened? Well, something changed in the world. When Adam rebelled against God ate the fruit from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, God cursed the world. He said, "Cursed is the ground because of you, and pain you shall eat of it all the days of your life." This is where death started. This is where suffering started. This is where pain started. This is where hunger started. And hungry animals eat whatever they can find. But we have to be careful, because science will rip the rug right out from underneath you when you're not paying attention. Several years ago, big international news. They found, well, say it this way. Paleontology has gotten more sophisticated. Back in the 1800s, they find a bone bed, and they chisel out the bones and bring them back to the big museums, and they charge people money to go see these giant dinosaurs. Well, younger paleontologists today have gone back to those same collection sites, and they're looking at the ground, and they're saying they destroyed everything. Because in the quest to get the big bones, they dug right through all the little ones. All the mammals that were buried with dinosaurs that they ignored for 150 years are now being discovered. In fact, we now have as many species of mammals as we have species of dinosaurs in a so-called dinosaur era. All different types of mammals. But as they're getting more sophisticated, they realize that sometimes when you find a dinosaur buried in a rock, not only the bones, but you can see an outline in the rock that's stained in the shape of its body, meaning it was buried whole and rotted after it was buried. And once they realized that, they said, oh, hey, there's the heart, there's the liver, there's the stomach. Let's sample the stomach of the dinosaur. When they did that, they found most of the theropods. What's a theropod? This is a theropod. Most of the theropods with the forward-pointing eyes like a predator and the sharp claws and the sharp teeth, their stomachs are packed with plants. Oh. In fact, I was taught even in graduate school, grasses didn't evolve till 35 million years ago. Grass, bamboo and the stuff grown in your yard. I mean, it's everywhere in the world. Grasses are very diverse, and they're very young geologically, but they found basically all the different types of grasses, evidence of it, in dinosaur stomachs. Even though it doesn't appear anywhere in the fossil record until much later, it's in dinosaur stomachs, meaning the fossil record is fickle. Some things are preserved and some things aren't. If we didn't think to look in that rock, we never would have known grasses were there. But let's turn around and use a modern analogy. When a black bear can't get into a garbage can, what does it eat in the wild? 99% of a black bear's diet is plants. When a polar bear is hunting, what does it eat? 99% of a polar bear's diet is meat. They have the same claws. They have the same teeth. God designed a black bear's teeth. It can put a blueberry branch in his mouth and go and pull the blueberries off and leave the leaves on the stem. Those are genius. But those same teeth can tear into thick seal flesh. Those roots that bears use to dig in the ground, the claws bears use to dig up roots from the ground are also really good at holding a struggling animal down as it gets devoured. You've heard of the word adaptation, right? Well, I believe that white coat color of bears is an adaptation. If you've ever seen a bear in the forest, they're totally visible until they stop moving. I've seen bears in the forest. You can see them, and if they stop, oh, where'd it go? It was over there a minute ago. He's looking at you. He's right there, and he's invisible in the trees. The opposite is true on ice. A white bear would never be able to find food in the forest if it was trying to hunt meat. You see it a mile away, but on ice, it's a great camouflage. That's adaptation. There's another word, though, probably never heard of. It's called exaptation. That's when you use a tool for something it wasn't originally designed for. Hey guys, you're asked to hang up a picture. And so you go down to the toolbox and you pull out that little plastic drawer that holds all the picture hanging things in it, right? And you go in the bedroom and you have to poke a hole in the drywall and put a little piece of plastic in there and then put the screw in the plastic. You know what I'm talking about, right? And how many times you've done that and you forgot to bring your hammer to poke the hole? So what do? You take the screwdriver, you turn it around, you go pop, 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 pop. All right. That's acceptation. You use a screwdriver as a hammer. It works perfectly fine in that case. Most all the things we call adaptations for carnivory are acceptations. I remember when they sequenced the rattlesnake genome, they were shocked. There are no poison genes in a rattlesnake. No. There's no extra anything. Rattlesnake poison is normal proteins that our cells manufacture. Just when you take a normal protein at a high concentration and inject it into the bloodstream of another species, it tends to coagulate the blood and things like that. I mean, it's bad news. They're just regular old proteins. Oh, but we know the dinosaurs were eating meat. That's a duck-billed dinosaur, a hadrosaur, with a T-Rex tooth embedded in its spine. I guess it's a tailbone. Tailbone's an extension of the spine. But it healed. Meaning, not only did the dinosaur survive a T-Rex attack, it walked around the rest of its life in pain. Why did God send the flood? What was the world full of? Evil, wickedness, murder, death, strife. The fossil record is a product of Noah's flood. What would we expect to see in the fossil record? Not the Garden of Eden. Oh, and that's exactly what we see in the fossil record. Nature red in tooth and claw, right there all throughout the fossil record. That's because of biblical history. Oh, but wait a minute. Biblical history also talks about a Noah's flood. Is there any evidence that the dinosaurs died out in Noah's flood? Come on. Really? Oh, see, I see people doing both. I love that. You remember the first, you older people, Jurassic Park #1, was that 1988 or something like that? The opening scene, they're out in the desert, and then this machine goes boom in the ground, and they run over to the computer screen, and computers back then were so fast, it drew a picture of the dinosaur. Whoosh, 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 whoosh. And it slowly revealed the velociraptor in that pose. That's called the dead dinosaur posture. We find the evolutionary paleontologists, that's what they call it. For a long time, they didn't know why dinosaurs were in that pose. Almost all the time when you find a dinosaur that's intact in the fossil record, his head is arched up, his back is arched, his tail is lifted. That's weird. Because when reptiles die today, when cows die today, they don't go and lay arch backwards on the ground. Ankylosaurs, though, are not in that pose. But ankylosaurs can't arch backwards. They have a giant shell. But most of the time we find an ankylosaur, it's upside down. Why? Because something that's top-heavy, that's sinking in water, is going to flip over. And the dead dinosaur posture, they realize that when you take an animal with a long neck and a long tail, they often have a structure called the ligamentum elasticum. It's a thick, rubbery, tough, muscular tendon thing that runs from the base of the skull down the spine and down the tail. So a chicken doesn't need muscles to hold its head up. The thing that runs down the spine is kind of rubbery. It's a rubber band. Doinga, 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 doinga. That's brilliant. Big dinosaurs, they held their tail up for balance. They held their head up and had a structure that runs down it so they don't have to go like, oh, I got to hold my head up for 8 hours. I'm trying to eat this grass. No, it was easy for them to do it. But when you drown them, they tend to go as they're gasping for breath. The central nervous system is short-circuiting, and that's what happens. So this is not evidence of animals that died on land. This is evidence of animals that died in water, which is why they're buried with fish and clams and other things. Oh, so even the evolutionary paleontologist says the dead dinosaur posture is evidence of drowning. Well, Mr. Evolutionist, how come most all the dinosaurs we find were drowned? They're land animals. Oh, maybe there was a Noah's flood that killed them. Oh, but does Noah have a problem? How do we get an animal like that? It couldn't fit through the doors in this room. How do we get an animal like that onto Noah's Ark? Well, let me give you several ideas. One, within each one of the created kinds of dinosaurs, there's a range of species sizes. Yeah, there's some giant hadrosaurs. There's also small hadrosaurs. There's giant theropods. There's also small theropods. Here's Compsognathus. Fully grown, he's the size of a chicken. Noah doesn't have to take the big ones. He could have taken the little ones. But even if he took the big ones, he doesn't have to take great-great-granddaddy Apatosaurus. He could take in, I don't think eggs, but how about babies, juveniles, teenagers? Looking at the bones of dinosaurs, we can see a growth curve. They went through a teenage growth spurt. The biggest dinosaurs in the fossil record look like they're only about 30 years old. Oh, wow, that's weird. Remember as a kid reading the account of people living a long time in Genesis and saying, oh, what if an iguana lived for hundreds of years? Would it morph into a T-Rex? No, because baby T-Rexes look just like big T-Rexes. Remember, they have different hip shapes, different holes in the skull. But Noah could have brought 10-year-old Apatosaurus. He's maybe as big as a pony. Whoop-de-doo. But how many dinosaurs would Noah have had to take on the ark? For the unclean animals, 2 of each kind. How many kinds of dinosaurs? I said that a little while ago. About 50? What's 50 times 2? About 100. Oh, okay. But even if he had to take the biggest ones, there's still plenty of room inside that vessel. Now, if you're thinking, oh, they can't build ships that big, nonsense. The Chinese were building ships the size and shape of Noah's Ark with a flat bottom in the 1600s, and they sailed at least as far as Madagascar. They explored the Philippines and Indonesia. They probably discovered Australia. In the 1600s, and Noah's Ark ships, and those ships had masts. What's the weakest part of an ocean-going ship? It's the strain produced by a mast. It tends to split and break the ship. No mast in Noah's Ark. It's a very strong box, and yes, people can build things that big. Okay. So there's multiple ways we can get the dinosaurs onto Noah's Ark. It's actually a non-problem when you realize we have so many potential answers. But they're not here today. And I get to ask the question, what happened to them? What's going on here? There we go. That was weird. Did you see that a minute ago? Oh, I didn't. All right. It's still being weird. Okay, we're just going to roll with it here. Technology's strange. The largest land animals that have ever lived are all extinct. Why? Because it's hard to be big. You need more food to survive, which means larger animals have a hard time surviving droughts and famines. 2, generally, the larger you have to grow to the adult size, the longer you wait until you have offspring. And that's a problem, because the smaller versions of your species will start having babies before you. By the time this extinct Andean condor laid a single egg, maybe it was 10 years old. But the California condors mature much faster. In fact, a normal-sized condor might have been a great-great-great-grandbird by then, and might have 1,000 or 10,000 or more descendants before that one laid a single egg. So in the genetic lottery, who wins? The smaller ones that reproduce faster. In the ecological lottery, who wins? The smaller ones that don't need as much food. There's always pressure on large animals to go extinct, which is why elephants probably are going to go extinct in the wild, but mice never will. That right there might be an explanation of what happened to the dinosaurs after the flood, if we're talking about large dinosaurs. Okay? But if they lived on this earth and people saw them, I think there should be some evidence that we saw them, right? Well, there are some. I'm going to give you my 2 favorite bits of evidence. I know a lot of speakers at this point will start throwing up slide after slide of evidence of man living with dinosaurs. Most of it I'm very uncomfortable with. Most of that evidence I just don't trust. But there's a couple of them I love. One of them is a tomb in England. It's 600 years old. It's 400 years before we supposedly discovered dinosaurs. And in this tomb, or in that rectangular band, we see carved a bat, a dog, a fish, a bird. Anyone disagree with me? And two sauropod dinosaurs with their necks wrapped around each other. Notice the tails are held outright, not like the Fred Flintstone variety with the tags dragging on the ground. That's ridiculous. They held their tails upright to balance the head. Notice the legs are standing upright. Now this is hard to see, but this one's neck is arched this way, and this one's neck is arched that way. And this guy's got spikes on his tail, like Spinosaurus, one of only two sauropod dinosaurs we found with spikes. Now that motif is very common. Here's another one of two sauropod sort of looking animals with their necks wrapped around each other. This is found in ancient Mesopotamia. But they look like they're too long, right? Well, consider Tenostropheus. If I was going to invent a mythological animal, I'd invent, the wolf that was 50 feet tall and ate the village. I wouldn't be talking about, later on in mythology, the dragons had started breathing fire and casting magic spells. Nonsense. The earlier stuff, we talk about big, scaly, lizardy things, are very matter of fact, and usually the big, scaly, lizardy thing gets killed by the villagers because it's eating their crops. Let's go to the other side of the world, to a city called Angkor Wat in Cambodia. About 600 years ago, this was the largest city in the world. It's the head of the Khmer Empire. And they had an amazing irrigation system that allowed them to grow enough rice to feed millions of people. And the civilization collapsed after a drought. And the forest came and covered it up. And now the Vietnam War is over and things like that. Archaeologists are going back to this area and hacking the jungle back and re-exposing this amazing, huge city. And there's one temple. This is the Ta Prohm Temple. There's a door frame. In that door frame, there's a monkey, there's a Buddha, there's a water buffalo, and encircled is that. What does that look like to you? A stegosaur. Now his head's a little too big, okay. But he's standing upright, okay. You can't see the spikes in his tail, fine. But man, that's very that's unlike any other kind of animal they might have seen. It's not an elephant, it's not a water buffalo. Right around the corner, someone recently found another carving that looks even more like a stegosaur than this one does. I need a picture of that. But if man did live with dinosaurs, they might have left some evidence behind. And if the fossil record is fickle, then maybe dinosaurs did live after the flood for a while, in small pockets, in places, and didn't leave any bones behind. That's fine. Think of the millions upon millions of people that must have lived, even in biblical history, over the last 4,000 years, 4,000 and a half years since Noah's flood. How many millions of people didn't leave any evidence that they ever lived? Most of them. Okay. You ever seen a picture like this? You ever hear the phrase, the age of dinosaurs? You already know two things that are missing from this picture. 1, grass. 2, mammals. 3, birds. That is false. And that picture that all of us older people were raised with was deliberately misleading to make us misunderstand the reality. I said earlier, we found as many species of mammals with dinosaurs. Yeah, mammals that look like flying squirrels, platypus fossils, things that look like badgers, things that look like beavers, things that are identical to hedgehogs. Hedgehogs have hairs that are unlike any other animal. They're not porcupines. They're hedgehogs. Well, that fossil of a hedgehog is the size of a hedgehog, the shape of a hedgehog, and his hairs are petrified along with the bones, and they're hedgehog hairs. So next time there's a Jurassic Park movie, they better show a hedgehog running in the underbrush. But they're not going to. But the dates are also on there. What is MA? Do you see the word MA on there? That's Latin for mega annum, or millions of years ago. Wait a second. If dinosaurs died out 65 million years ago, then things that look like badgers, in fact, there's a baby Psittacosaurus in its stomach, predated when the evolutionists believe the dinosaurs evolved. Oh. This platypus, I mean, that groove in the jaw, that's for the giant nerve that runs to the bill of the platypus. The only difference is it was about twice as big as a modern platypus, and he had teeth. It's still a platypus. Here's another Psittacosaurus being bitten by another mammal. This is Rapenomamus robustus. That's the one on the other slide also. So not only do we have one fossil with the Psittacosaurus in its stomach, we have another one where they're wrapped up and buried together as one's attacking the other. Well, that's really cool. You ever see the movie Hidden Figures 10 years ago? Kevin Costner, right? The African-American ladies who are doing all the calculations to get the man to the moon. What a great movie. Well, this guy, a couple of years ago, was dropping his wife off at that facility in Maryland. And he looks over in the woods, and there's this rocks that trees have grown up in. I think it was the basement when they dug the building. They threw all the rocks to the side, and it became woods. So he just wanders in there, and he finds a world-class fossil discovery. It's a rock about this big. And in this rock, there are sauropod footprints. There are pterosaur footprints. There's a nodosaur footprint. There's a coprolite, which is a piece of fossilized dinosaur dung. There's a osteoderm, which is a bone from the skin of a dinosaur. And then in blue, mammal footprints. Oh, that's cool. See, fossils aren't just bones. This is fossilization of the behavior of a community of organisms who lived at the same time and walked through the same mud puddle. That's neat. Yes, mammals lived with dinosaurs. But so did birds. But a lot of the birds in the fossil record have teeth. They're not like reptile teeth. They're very different. They're more like dolphin teeth, which are like peg-like. A lot of the birds in the fossil record have claws on their wings. You know the wing is the hand of the bird, right? Drives me nuts when you see like How to Train Your Dragon, and there's like 4-legged dragons with wings. That makes it a hexapod. No, there's only, and someone's like, duh, Rob, it's magic. It's like, oh yeah, okay, sorry. Sometimes I gotta calm down when I'm watching things. But a lot of the ancient fossils of birds have claws. There's also something else weird about a lot of fossil birds. When you eat a chicken, there's a keel on the sternum, right? So when you want to dig the white meat out, there's this thing there. That keel is an attachment point for the muscles, makes a triangle and makes their chest muscles much stronger, helping them to fly. A lot of the ancient birds had a flat breastbone, like a reptile. But there's one modern bird. It's called the hoatzin. Strangely, we just had his genome sequenced last year. It's an outgroup from all other birds. It's a weird bird. They also stink because they do like a cow. They ferment, and so it's called the stink bird. But he has claws on his wings, and it has a flat breastbone, and is genetically distinct from all the living birds. I think this is a holdover. I think this is one of the dinosaur-era birds that's still with us today. But we don't have DNA from the dinosaur-era bones because Jurassic Park and that DNA stuff is ridiculous. It's not going to happen. Maybe someday we will find a little bit. Here's a bird, Anchiornis huxleyi, named after a good friend of Charles Darwin, Thomas Huxley. Notice it's the left and right of the same fossil. Why is that important? About the year 2000, National Geographic had on the front page the feathered dinosaur. And some paleontologists were like, it's too good to be true. So they went back to this place in China where this fossil had come from, and they searched and searched the rubble until they found the counter slab, and it didn't match. Some very enterprising villager had found a bird fossil and a reptile fossil, broke them and glued them together and sold it to National Geographic for a couple of $1 million. So fossils, you have to look at them carefully. But look at this thing. Do you see the feathers? Can feathers be preserved in a fossil record? They can be? Do dinosaurs have feathers? Nothing like this. But notice also, the tail is just feathers. Birds don't have long bony tails like a reptile. You come home and your dog is happy to see you. And you have a Labrador, right? And he's wagging his tail, and the tail goes, oh man, it hurts. Why does it hurt? Because it's made of bones. That's their spinal cord, their spinal column. Birds don't have that. All right, next time you eat chicken, you're going to be like, Carter said I need to look at the butt of a chicken. Look at the rear end of a chicken. There's just a couple of bones, and they're very stiff. It's called the pygostyle. If a bird has a tail, like a peacock or an eagle, there's a pygostyle, and then there's this feathers that stick up off of it. And there's muscle attachment points on that. Some of the ancient birds, well, they don't have long bony tails. They have pygostyle. Some of them are a little longer than normal modern birds, but they're also very stiff. They're not a normal bony tail. It's flexible. So if there's feathers, it's just, look at this thing. Sorry. It has a pygostyle. It has twin tail feathers. It has a beak. What's the difference between a beak and a jaw? This is a beak. I can't lift my upper jaw. A bird has a movable palate, so its upper jaw can also lift. This is a bird. It's got wing claws. It may or may not have teeth, I'm not sure, but it's a bird, just a weird bird. They found a bird with an egg inside it, the only fossil ever to be bird fossil with an egg. But there's multiple layers of eggshell. What's up with that? Well, if you chase a bird and you don't let it roost when it's time to lay the egg, every day it lays down another layer of eggshell. You know the phrase in Genesis when Noah sent out the bird, it could find no place to rest? The only bird we've ever found with an egg inside it could find no place to rest, and it died in the flood after a couple of days. That's cool. Here's another bird. Look, you see the chicken legs here? Look, it's 130 million years ago, this very bird-like thing in the fossil record. Now, you can't see it from here, but the lungs are preserved. That's critically important because birds don't breathe like you and me. They might breathe in and out the nose, but the air goes through the lung, out the bottom of the lung, goes around, actually the back, and comes back up again. They have a one-way lung. You don't. Your air goes down about this far, and the oxygen diffuses down, and the carbon dioxide diffuses up. We have a very inefficient lung, which is why we can't run a 1-minute mile. Birds, though, don't have that dead space. They can pull a lot more oxygen out a lot faster. Reptiles don't breathe like this either. We have a diaphragm that moves in and out. A reptile moves their liver. Their liver is the pump that inflates and deflates their lungs. So the first step in the evolution of a bird from a reptile, well, you have to poke a hole in the bottom of the lung. And then what happens? The animal dies. Birds are incredibly well designed in all sorts of different ways. And they're very different than dinosaurs. But are humans in kingdom Animalia? By every scientific measure we are. Are we in the mammalian family? We have all the characteristics of mammals. Are we primates? We have all the characteristics of primates. We're more similar to chimpanzees morphologically, behaviorally, and genetically than any other species. Okay. Now, I don't think that's proof of evolution. That's proof of God. God designed hierarchically. Groups of groups of groups of groups of groups. Okay, that's fine. Apply that same thought to birds, and birds cluster within a group of a group of a group of reptiles. I'm fine with that. In fact, if we found dinosaurs with feathers, okay. The Bible does not say dinosaurs did not have feathers. And yet, I'm unconvinced by the evidence. This is the first feathered dinosaur claim, Sinosauropteryx. There's a fuzz that runs down his back on both sides of his tail here. And that was looked at as proof that dinosaurs had feathers. But another paleontologist, an evolutionary paleontologist, several years later looked at it under a microscope and said, oh, I see the level of the skin, and all that fuzzy stuff is underneath the skin. I mean, that's just decayed skin tissue. Oh. On the top here is a velociraptor arm bone. And there's a rectangle there, and when you zoom up on it, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 arrows pointing at these little knobs on a velociraptor arm bone. They're equally spaced. Those are called quill knobs. Maybe. This is the turkey vulture wing on the bottom. Strip away the feathers, and you have a bone with a bunch of bumps on it. Those are quill knobs. That's the attachment point of the feather to the bone. Not all birds have that. Penguins don't have it. Albatrosses don't have that. Birds that don't stick their feathers up when they're flying and change the shape of their wing as they're flying don't have quill knobs. Nobody believes the velociraptor could fly. Even if it had feathers, why would it have quill knobs? 2, that's not really convincing evidence of quill knobs. I don't know the answer. I'm just saying that I'm not on the fence. I'm leaning away from the feathered dinosaur side, but I can't disprove it. And if they do prove it someday, I'm not going to lose my faith over it. You okay with that? But T-Rex didn't have feathers. We have skin fossils from all different places on the T-Rex body. No feathers. To have a feather, you need a hole in the skin. A feather is essentially a hyper-complex, huge hair. Chemically, they're similar, slightly different proteins, but they're similar. But a feather is a hollow shaft that grows and then unfurls into a very complex structure. And you would see a hole in the skin of the dinosaur. There's no feathers there. But what if none of this matters? What if I could show you that dinosaur fossils cannot be millions of years old? I think we conclude then that evolution just isn't going to happen. Let me give you 3 pieces of evidence. 1, these are some pictures from an electron microscope that some of my friends took when they went out to Montana and collected a horn of a triceratops. These delicate bone pieces, these tend to turn to powder over time. These blobs with the spikes, those are bone cells. Those are called osteoblasts. Bone cells in a 70-million-year-old fossil? A non-petrified fossil? Yeah, the outside of the bone is hard as rocks. The inside had not been lithified. That's original bone material. What? Well, evolutionists had published this several years before that. This is the inside material from a T-Rex leg bone taken out of the same spot in Montana, in the Hell Creek Formation. And in that leg bone, after you decalcify with a very weak acid, you can dissolve away the bone, you're left with stinky, flexible tissue, blood vessels, red blood cells. Notice the little dots in the red blood cells? Those are the nuclei. You don't have nuclei in your red blood cells. Mammals don't. Reptiles do. Oh. Same laboratory several years later, they isolated some cells. Again, cells and dinosaurs, how come they haven't disintegrated? And they did something that I've done in the laboratory. Now, this is my field. This is genetics. There's a stain called DAPI. When you soak the cell in that and then wash it with water, the stain washes out of the cell except for DNA. Because it's a flat molecule that when you have a double helix of DNA, that molecule sticks into the double helix. And when you shine ultraviolet light on it, it fluoresces green. So not only is there evidence of DNA inside dinosaur bones, it lights up what looks like a nucleus. Oh, hold it. Bacteria have DNA. Maybe that's bacterial DNA. Well, that's what the second set of pictures is for. They use another stain that stains the protein that DNA wraps around in your nucleus. It's called a histone. Bacteria don't have histones. There are histones in the dinosaur cells. Soft tissue, evidence of DNA. Two things arguing for not millions of years. There's a book that we carry on our website, Untold Secrets of Planet Earth. In that book, there's a reproduction of a letter from the University of Georgia Radiocarbon Lab, writing the author, "Don't send us any more samples." Because he was sending them dinosaur samples. He was labeling them buffalo. Was that lying? Is it deceitful? He couldn't label them dinosaur. They would have sent them back. And they were consistently getting carbon-14 readings. We've had multiple dinosaurs and multiple different carbon dating labs all give us about the same number. Now, the number, I think, is skewed because the closer to Noah's flood you get, the more stretched out the carbon date should be. That's another story for another day. You can look at my article, How Carbon Dating Works, on creation.com. But there's any carbon-14 in dinosaur bones. And if that's the original carbon, that's proof that the bones aren't millions of years old. Because carbon-14 can't last millions of years. If the entire Earth was pure carbon-14, there would be 0 atoms left in less than 1 million years. Carbon-14, DNA, soft tissue. Which area of science do you want to reject so that you can hold on to the idea that dinosaurs are millions of years old? Noah's flood, after creation of dinosaurs, and a young Earth beautifully explains what we see. Can we answer all the questions? No. Can we answer most of the questions? Yes. And some of the questions are extremely supportive of the biblical model. A lot more on creation.com or on Creation Magazine. There's a book out there for kids, Exploring Dinosaurs with Mr. Hibb. It's a little cricket, and he's going around looking at dinosaurs and things and learning all sorts of really cool. I learned stuff in that book when I read it. Sometimes we write kids' books so the adults can understand, just saying. There's a dinosaur pack out there. There's tons of material on this subject. We've done multiple videos on this, podcasts, our social media program, which is all over different social media platforms, has lots of dinosaur information. This is a very active topic for us because it seems to be a very good evolutionary stronghold that was actually already taken over by the creationists. I'll leave you with this, 1 Peter 3:15. In your hearts, honor Christ the Lord as holy, always being prepared to make a defense to anyone who asks you for reason for the hope that's in you, including questions about dinosaurs. You do it with gentleness and respect. So yes, we have answers, but 2, you need to study to learn the answers, and 3, we don't have to be jerks about it. If God is on our side, we can be very strong and very confident that the answer is there. Now, sometimes you're in a conversation and they say something, you don't know what they said, or you don't remember the answer. What do? Hey, hold it. I'm going to go back to creation.com. I'm coming back tomorrow. I'm going to answer that question. That's what you do. Or you say, you know what? I bet that answer's on creation.com. Let's look for it. You pull it up right there. We've got your back. That's why we're here. You okay? Let's pray. Father, we just open up a very difficult subject. There's some people here that are really struggling with this. There's people here who maybe flat out don't agree with it, or they used to agree with it, or they want to. Father, increase our faith. Help us to have the brave spirit that will take your word at face value and then fill in the gaps as we go. Help us to learn, help us to understand these things, but not just for ourselves, Lord, so that we can share the gospel of Jesus Christ with other people. And if they're using dinosaurs as an excuse to reject the Bible, give us the words that we need to speak to tell them the Bible is true, it can be trusted, therefore Jesus Christ really is the Son of God, etc. Thank you for this beautiful day. We rejoice in your presence. Amen.